A guy who was mocked in the top 10 in terms of prospects and in the draft, a lot of places, has fallen to the Orioles at number 19. We like Ike, as Ike Irish is the Orioles' first round pick. You'll get the scouting report coming up on this special live episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Sunday, July 13th, 2025, and welcome back into a special live edition of the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Connor Newcomb. Thank you so much if you are joining us here live on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. We thank you so much. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel while you are here. But we are live just shy of 8 p.m. Eastern time here on Sunday evening because the Orioles have just made their first selection in the 2025 MLB Draft. With the 19th overall pick, Mike Elias and Matt Blood and the Orioles have selected Auburn catcher and outfielder Ike Irish with this selection. Now, first and foremost, Irish kind of became, in this draft so far, we're into the 20s in the first round as I record here live, Irish became the first guy to really fall down draft boards at all. There were some interesting picks early. I mean, it started off with Willits going number 1 to the Nats, which was pretty surprising. But most of the top prospects were, most of the top 10 guys went in the top 10. Most of the top 15 guys went in the top 15, just in an interesting order. Ike Irish was a top 10 guy in this draft for a lot of draft experts. Joe Doyle, who we had on the show last week to preview what the Orioles could do at this pick, had Irish as his number 10 overall prospect available in the draft. We didn't even talk about Ike Irish that much when we had Joe on because nobody thought he was going to drop all the way down to number 19. And that is what the Orioles have here in Ike Irish. So let's talk about who is he as a player, talk about his hitting, his fielding, and then how he fits into this Orioles system. So Ike Irish is a 21-year-old left-handed hitter. He will be 22 this November and is a native of Michigan who was honestly a pretty good prospect coming out of high school, but had signed with Auburn and decided to go to Auburn to play his college baseball. And he had a fantastic 3-year career at Auburn. Came there as a freshman in 2023 and just stepped in and immediately was in that Auburn lineup. Now, it was pretty interesting in 2023 because, it kind of split time. He was catching, he was playing first base, he was DHing as a freshman, but he was hitting. Hit 361 with a 975 OPS. The power wasn't there. He only had 6 home runs that season, but he put on display how good of a player he could be. Came back to Auburn for his sophomore year in 2024. Did miss a little bit of time, but when he was on the field, he took a step forward, especially in his power. He did have 24 doubles as a freshman, but the old adage of those doubles will turn into homers once you get stronger. That is what happened for Irish. He went from 6 to 14 home runs in 11 fewer games played and 60 fewer plate appearances from 2023 to 24. Hit only 319, but his OPS was up to 1030 in that sophomore year. And during that sophomore campaign, they started to move him around the diamond a little bit more. He became more of the main catcher where he caught 25 games, but he also played 12 games out in right field, something that he had not done for Auburn during his freshman year. Then, as a junior this year, he was already known coming into the season that Irish was going to be a pretty solid draft prospect, but this year he catapulted himself into the first round. Stayed healthy, played in 55 games, had 258 plate appearances for Auburn this season, hit 364 with a 469 on base percentage and a 710 slugging. He slugged 710. That is an 1179 OPS. Did it with 19 home runs, 13 doubles, and oh yeah, he got his strikeouts under control, and he got his walks up. 33 walks to 37 strikeouts in the season. He was also hit by 10 pitches, which allowed him to get on base, as he doesn't stand super close to the plate, but he's up on the line a little bit, and he just flashed the gigantic raw power from the left side. Let's talk about the bat first, because that is the reason why he gets picked in the first round. That is the reason why Ike Irish goes number 19 overall to the Orioles. He is a left-handed power bat, but he has all the tools. This is not a similar profile to Vance Honeycutt, who the Orioles took in the first round last year, where Honeycutt had incredible power, probably better than Irish even has, but had extreme swing and miss issues. That is not the case with Irish. When you strike out 37 times in 258 plate appearances in the SEC, you do not have any swing and miss problems. Now, there's some potential issues with, he has power, but maybe doesn't hit the ball on the ground too much. That's something that Joe Doyle writes about in his write-up. But what Doyle does write about specifically is his plate discipline just took a giant step forward in 2025. The overall whiff rate, according to Joe, went down and basically became a superstar in the best baseball conference in the country and one of the best teams in the country this year in the Auburn Tigers. He mashed lefties. He hit over 360 against lefties, pitchers, even as a left-handed hitter. And that doesn't carry a lot of weight in college, but carries a little more weight when you're playing in the SEC and playing into the postseason. It's a really pretty left-handed swing. I would encourage you to go on YouTube, watch some Ike Irish highlights. It's big pop. It's a good body, but it's not like he's this giant hulking slugger. Like, he's listed, I believe, at 6'2", 210, basically at this point, which is just kind of a solid build for a catcher type. It's not like he's huge and can't run. Now, I'm not saying he stole a million bases, but he did go 11 for 12 stealing bases in his junior year. So I don't think he's going to run forever, but it's not like there's zero speed in his game. That is somewhat of a tool that Irish does have as well. It's just been a sensational offensive profile. He homered off of Liam Doyle this year. You may know Liam Doyle, who was selected in the top 5 earlier today, the left-handed pitcher out of Tennessee. He went yard off of him, I believe, in maybe one of his only at-bats that he had against Doyle this season. Speaking of Joe Doyle writing about some of the data that he had, an average exit velocity near 95 miles an hour. Remember, 95 miles an hour is considered a hard hit ball in the major leagues. And exit velos are pumped up a bit in college because they use the metal bats instead of wood bats. So you take these numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt. But Ike Irish, according to Joe Doyle's write-up over at Future Star Series Plus, and make sure to subscribe to all the great work he does, he peaked with a high exit velocity of 114 miles an hour this year at Auburn. That is serious power with not having strikeout issues, even against left-handed pitchers as a left-handed batter. And he just crushes the baseball. That average exit velocity was in the 98th percentile of all college hitters, according to Joe Doyle. That is some insane stuff. He's not going to not swing at everything outside of the zone. He loves his swing. He's got a little Samuel Basallo in him where he chases outside of the zone a little too much because he knows he can hit those pitches. It might just end up as weaker. Like for Basallo, he doesn't swing and miss a lot out of the zone. It just ends up being weaker contact because it's not a good pitch to swing at. Ike Irish has a little bit of that, and it is kind of funny why he is very similar to Samuel Basallo, and I think it is because the questions of will he be a catcher? And John has a question here as we're coming to you live from the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Why did he fall? If Joe Doyle had him ranked number 10 and he falls to number 19 in the Major League Baseball draft, falling isn't always because there's something wrong. It could be about the slot values and how much money certain teams want to give you. But it could be about teams having question about him as a catcher because, as I mentioned, he was kind of a split time between catcher and first base and DH as a freshman. He was, I would say, closer to the main catcher. He wasn't catching every day as a sophomore, but he was closer to the main catcher. And then he really just didn't do it a lot this year. Irish caught only 12 games for the Auburn Tigers this season out of his 55. He DH'd a little bit, but he was essentially in the outfield, 41 games in right field and 4 games in left field for Irish at Auburn. Remember, they kind of tried him out there in right field a little bit in his sophomore year. They had another good catcher. Chase Fralick had a great season as Auburn's more main catcher this year, and they wanted to get both guys in the lineup. And Irish had the athleticism to run around out there in the outfield. And it's kind of remember where there was that stretch where people maybe thought the Orioles would try to move Kobe Mayo to right field because it was kind of struggling with some of the footwork and the hands at third base, but he had that just incredibly strong arm. And it was just like, and he had the athleticism. And that's why people like Eric Longenhagen at Fangraphs thought, hey, maybe we move Kobe Mayo out to right field because he's probably not a third baseman. We've kind of come to the point where he's probably not a third baseman, although the Orioles have just said, hey, Kobe's a first baseman. But that's one of the reasons why Ike Irish went out to right field. It's like he's not the greatest defensive catcher out there, not the greatest framer or receiver behind the plate, but he has an absolute bullet for an arm back there, and he has the athleticism. So you know what? That's the package of a solid corner outfielder. Let's put him out there and see how he does. And guess what? He was completely solid defensively as a right fielder for Auburn. He's not going to, win a Gold Glove or the version of that in the SEC out in right field, but I think what's also interesting is that Rob Manfred did announce him as a catcher. Now, that doesn't always mean everything, but the Orioles do choose how he's going to announce him, catcher or outfielder, and they announced him as a catcher. So at the very least, there's a question from Jonathan, do you think he'll play catcher or outfield for the Birds? I think he'll play both when he first, begins his minor league season later this year, and I think they'll work him at both positions as he moves up the minors. Probably long-term, if he fell to 19, if you have a true catcher with this kind of bat, that's a top 5 pick potentially. So I maybe think he's more so of a corner outfielder long-term, just from my personal opinion. I've watched a solid amount of Ike Irish just with him being an everyday player for a good SEC team, and I love college baseball for the past 3 years. But there's a chance. And it's kind of, again, in that Samuel Basallo mold where it's like he's still catching, he's getting better and better defensively, and he could end up just moving to first base. Now, Irish is a little more versatile because it's going to be more of move to right field instead of move to first base, which is more important for your team. But even if he can catch a little bit, and this is something we've talked about, like how do the Orioles fit Basallo in 2026 with Adley Rutschman still here? Some sort of mix where, say you have 6 games in a week, Adley catches 4, Basallo catches 2, and Samuel plays a little bit of first base and DH when he's not catching, and Adley DHs when Basallo is catching. That's the kind of workaround you could have when Irish eventually hopefully gets to the big leagues as a Baltimore Oriole. I think at that point, he's kind of a part-time right fielder, part-time catcher, and that is a really, really valuable piece to have. If you have a guy on your roster who maybe isn't good enough defensively to be a true everyday catcher back there, but you can catch him some, and you can also play him, not just DH him or play him at first base, but actually play him in the outfield. And I think Irish can actually stick in the outfield long-term. That is crazy valuable. And not just for any team, but specifically a team like the Orioles, who theoretically would have Samuel Basallo clearly on this roster whenever Ike Irish would debut. Let's say, best case scenario, we see Irish, I don't know, I guess opening day 2027 would probably be like the fastest speediness to the big leagues. By opening day 2027, you've got Basallo and you've still got Adley Rutschman around. You could roster all 3 of those guys. And that's probably getting way too ahead of ourselves. But if you had a roster where you had Irish, Basallo, and Rutschman all on the roster, you had 2 other catchers that could come in and spell Rutschman. And maybe neither of them are premium defensive catchers. I don't think Basallo or Irish will be that in the major leagues. But they both get good enough defensively where they can catch, 1 or 2 big league games per week. It allows you to get Adley off his feet a little bit more. Then Adley and Basallo rotate in DH and first base, and Irish plays some right field and DHs. And again, he played some first base at Auburn, so he's got that in there as well. You've got this monster catching tandem that you don't see a lot in Major League Baseball. And you see some comments here from Chris, like Jason Kendall, comments from Michael at work for BJ Surhoff. We've seen guys do this before where they come up as catchers and they kind of move to other positions while still maintaining some of that skill to be able to catch if they need to. And some of those guys either went to those other positions full time or just ended up being catchers. But I think Irish has the tools, the hit tool, and the athleticism overall to do it all in the big leagues. I'm giving this pick an A+. The fact that our draft analyst who comes on Locked On Orioles every year, Joe Doyle, had him at number 10, and the Orioles get him at number 19, and he just has this insane bat from the left side, and that's the best part, right? We've had all these questions about Honeycutt last year. It's the crazy power, but the swing and miss. He's swung and missed a lot this year. We had all the questions about Bradfield 2 years ago. It's the incredible speed and defense and hit tool, but does he have enough power to play at the big leagues? And those 2 guys have questions. You got a guy, I think, in Ike Irish, who quite frankly is better than both of those guys, and you were able to pick him essentially right in a similar spot in the draft at number 19, maybe a little bit lower. That is a huge win, and I understand, why didn't they take a pitcher? Or they already have 2 good catchers. Why'd they take another catcher? Again, it's not guaranteed that Irish will be a catcher. He may be a right fielder by the time he gets there. But this is that pick where you just, in the MLB draft especially, You take the best player available. And when Ike Irish falls to 19, I don't know if the Orioles thought he'd be there. And I bet as soon as they got on the clock and he was still there, Elias and Matt Blood said, screw what's on the board. Well, not screw what's on the board, but say, we didn't think Ike Irish was still going to be on our board at this point. He is. He's an elite bat. He can catch. He's athletic. He's got a gun for an arm. He doesn't swing and miss a lot. He hits for power. This is kind of the whole package. And again, this is not a Jackson Holliday or Gunnar Henderson maybe type player. It's a tier down from that, certainly. It's the 19th pick in the draft. He's already 21 years old. He's going to be he's going to be 22 when he starts his first minor league season. But he's just so advanced that he could also climb the system pretty quickly. Like, I don't think it's crazy to think by opening day 2027, you're potentially looking at Ike Irish and Basayo and Rutschman, and that would be a whole lot of fun. Thank you so much for tuning in live here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe here on the channel. I'm going to be back later tonight. Remember, the Orioles have a lot of picks tonight. They go on a stretch where they pick 30th, 31st, and 37th. I'm going to be live again when that happens. I'm trying to figure out what exactly that timing is going to look like. The 24th pick just went through, so maybe around 8:30-ish. I am going to be back live here. Well, no, never mind. I'm actually going to wait. That's too many live episodes. We're going to wait till 30, 31, and 37 go off the board. So closer to 9:30 p.m., right back here, Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, break down those next three picks. Not going to do the other ones the Orioles have much later tonight, but definitely a lot more picks to talk about. Guys I would be targeting for the Orioles that are not off the board just yet. Wahiva Aloy has still not been taken. If he somehow drops himself all the way down to number 30, I would scoop him up immediately. That is the shortstop from Arkansas, one of the best players in college baseball this year. Devin Taylor, I am super intrigued in. He is a big power hitting outfielder out of Indiana who has crazy tools and crazy batted ball data. And I do think, I'm making my official prediction, I do think with one of these next three picks, the Orioles will take a pitcher, which would be the highest pitcher Elias has ever drafted. Look out for A.J. Russell from Tennessee, the right-handed pitcher. Those are some of my predictions for these next three picks if those players are there. And again, I'll be back with you about an hour or so once 30, 31, and 37 are off the board. Thank you so much for joining us live. Hope you're back here for that next episode on the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.